and welcome everyone. So we'll have a session about design and nature, and we have different research from different countries. We are happy with this diversity. So we will start with a presentation from Turkey. We'll have two other presentations from Brazil, another from Portugal, and finally one presentation from US, from Miami. So welcome everybody. I will start by share the videos, and then we'll follow up with that. So thank you again. Can you see my screen?
No, yes.
Hi, thanks a lot for the interest in this paper. I am Cansu Günaydın Donduran, and this research was a part of my graduate studies, which I have conducted with Professor Dr. Fehmi Doğan and Dr. Altuğ Kasalı at İzmir Institute of Technology. This study explores the integration of biomimicry into design processes by providing a closer look at architecture practice and research. And our aim was to propose a framework that can allow us to understand analogical steps of bio-inspired design processes. Selective sampling of the built examples from architecture practice is used within the body of this exploratory research, and the examples are selected on the basis of emerging bio-inspired concepts discussed in the literature by prominent authors and academicians. And in our research, they are presented through analogical categories, including transfer of physical properties of nature as form, structure, and material, transfer of performative principles of natural entities, and transfer of systematic principles extracted from nature. Regarding the studies on cognitive processes involved in the bio-inspired design, several categorizations have been introduced to explain biological inspirations embedded. Zero's function, behavior, structure, formulation approaches the issue from a perspective that design influences inherited from a primitive element that can be a physical or logical entity. Mechanisms' ideas are on form, behavior, and principles, explain the hierarchical relationships between each stage of the pyramid, and Basin and May append on their arguments and dividing it into two as materials and structures and mechanisms and processes. Chakrabarty's sapphire model of causality explains how an entity using physical phenomena works to achieve its function and change the state of itself and the surrounding. Based on the literature reviewed, we have synthesized a categorization consisting of three parts. The form is accepted as a preliminary element for researchers in theoretical approaches. It is the initial element that is perceived and related firsthand. Since it is inevitable to detach form from structure and its materiality, we will cover them under the topic of inspirations from the physical properties of nature under three subcategories: form, structure, and material. The second constituent of our categorization is covered as process, as behavior, as performance by different authors, and we taught process and behavior as two inseparable measures for the part analyzing performative aspects of nature inspiring building designs. And the third constituent to analyze by inspired design approaches is given as system and function, as principles and as organ and attribute by other authors. And common meeting ground of all of these is the systematic understanding of nature, which they are trying to deal with the relations in between the parts of a system observed in nature and attempts to apply in their design as a holistic approach. And we will call this category as building design inspirations from the systematic principles of nature. A classification for architectural approaches concerning their formulation of bio-inspired design is provided, and analogical transfer in different stages of the conceptual design are traced with the study of design process of key buildings. The prominent cases in literature focusing on the ones using text descriptions of biological phenomena to get visual representations explaining transfer via diagrams contains the stages of analogical transfer most clearly. Each category is presented with different biomimetic approaches and studied via a table set. And the physical properties of nature are used as a source of building design inspiration and classified in the three, as we have mentioned: form, structure, and material. The first chunk contains the buildings inspired by the forms in nature, and we have covered Burj Khalifa, the World Trade Center, and Helix Bridge in this section. And in the second chunk of the physical properties concentrates on the building inspired by the structures of nature, which are fascinated by the complex hierarchical orders of the buildings of the nature. And we have covered Water Cube, Bird's Nest, and Airport Stuttgart Terminal 3 in this section. And the third chunk covers an inseparable part of the form, which is materiality, and we have looked at the Loftus effect and photobioreactor algae used in building facade. Behavioral characteristics of biological organisms are imitated mechanically in building systems to perform in the similar ways that natural phenomena did. And we have looked at One Ocean thematic pavilion and Görkem building for this section. And systematic understanding and representation of nature allow these researchers and practitioners to join forces in the field of bio-inspired design. And in architecture, in the world of design, the algorithmic approach aims to encapsulate the relationship between the shapes and their relationship between the environment. And we have covered Eden Project and Albar Towers in this section. The projects reviewed were among the most striking cases from the architecture practice, either by opening a new path for later studies and constructions, or by being the most advanced building examples. The use of these prominent examples have allowed us to make a categorization of biomimetic approaches and understand analogical transfers used in different stages of design processes. And there are two benefits of doing this study. First, the categorization shed a light on the interaction inside and outside of the categories. Like nature, building forms are very much depending on the materials and specific structures. So we concluded that form, structure, and materiality are three inseparable constituents of any constructions, either natural or human-made. And secondly, the categorization informs us about the timing of occurrence, which eases to understand hierarchical and temporal relations occurring in between these categories. And as we can see in One Ocean thematic pavilion example, which uses single-step analogical transfer, however, the Görkem uses multiple-step analogical transfer in which the first transfer leads to the second one. And if we want to compare single-step analogical transfer versus compound analogical transfer, single-step analogical transfer can use one or more design clues inspired by different aspects of natural entity. However, these aspects are belonging the same thing. But in the compound analogies, they are composed of multiple analogical transfers, constructing at least two analogies or more representing the previous one, as mentioned by Goel and his colleagues. And the classification of architectural approaches concerning their formulation in bio-inspired design is examined within the body of this research in order to propose a framework to understand analogies used in design processes. We have built our research on prominent cases as discussed in literature, which allowed us to explore how they are using bio-inspired design strategies and trace their footsteps. This examination allowed us to see whether there are major chunks which can ease one's understanding of bio-inspired design strategies. Although we have come up with a categorization, we have observed that the categories are or can be permeable by way of context-dependent reinterpretation. This permeability of the categories makes it possible to evaluate biological analogies from a different perspective and understand analogical complexity behind the design solutions. Moreover, we have observed that one or more analogies can be involved in design process singularly or jointly and following each other or at the same time. Thank you for your interest, and if you want to have a deeper conversation, you may contact with us.
Hi everyone, my name is Iago Long Martins, and today I'll be presenting the paper entitled Parametry, an algorithm parametric tool for evaluating the contribution of the trees on rainwater management. This paper was written in association with my tutor, Ana Paula Rabelo Lira. This study was developed with the aim of exploring the application of an algorithm parametric tool that employs urban forestry as a design strategy to reduce the occurrence of flooding. Its relevance sits on the increasing vulnerability of the urban environment in face of the climate change, and the strategies contemplated in this paper are the use of technology as a tool to analyze and create solutions to urban issues such as flooding, and the sponge effect observed in green infrastructure elements such as the trees. So, to begin with the theory that grounds this research, it is said that a tree can intercept up to 300 liters of rainwater on the rainfall of intensity varying in between 25 to 50 millimeters. The impact of such volume intercepted is a decrease in 2 to 7% on runoff formation per year. The factors that interfere in this process are the intensity of rainfall, the density of leaves distribution, the structure of the canopy ramification, and the texture of leaves and bark. Why is it important to address these factors? Because the more intense a rainfall, the least the tree will be able to intercept, because it will reach the stage of saturation pretty sooner. The same with the density of leaves distribution and the structure of canopy ramification, because the denser is the canopy, the more it will be able to intercept. Also with the texture of leaves and bark. If the leaves and bark are harsh, it will be able to soak up with more volume of water. That said, it is important to point out that a high-intensity rainfall is the most vulnerable condition for the occurrence of flooding. In this situation, trees with a dense canopy structure have a better capacity for rainfall interception. Some authors in Brazil have already mapped the rainfall interception performance in species with such characteristics as shown in Table 1, but not all of them were able to analyze the impact of the canopy saturation in a high-intensity rainfall, which explains the blank spaces in the table. Also, we can notice that there are still an incipient number of studies in the field, which narrows the possibilities of application of different species in the study. The second part of the literature review contemplated the runoff calculation procedures. Among the procedures available, the most applied one in the field of architecture is the rational method, which is illustrated in this presentation. In this method, there is no variable that represents the impact of urban forestry on runoff formation, which reinforces the demand explored in this paper. The method applied in this study comprises 4 stages. The first stage is the estimation of the capacity of rainfall interception during a high-intensity rainfall for the species that lack this information in Table 1. The second stage is the data collection on runoff coefficient through literature review. The third stage is adaptation of the rational method equation and the creation of an algorithm parametric tool based on this new equation using C# scripting in Grasshopper. And the last stage is the application of the tool into 3 different urban contexts and the comparison between the results attained with the tool and the ones got from a conventional method of the pixel map. To find the interception in a high-intensity rainfall, it was applied a ratio between the values of the interception in a high and in a low-intensity rain for the species with this performance mapped. A constant number of 0.36 was identified in this process and then multiplied by the value of the interception in a low-intensity rainfall for the following group of species, obtaining the result that was expected. The 2 species with the best interception are highlighted in the table. The next stage was characterized by the identification of the runoff coefficient for the most common materials used in urban areas. The closer the coefficient is to 1, the more impermeable is the material. That said, as shown in Table 4, concrete is a very impermeable material, while porous concrete is a quite permeable one. Then, an adjustment in the equation was made by inserting the variables related to the process of rainfall interception by the trees. These variables are the area of the basin covered by trees and the capacity of rainfall retention. The following image shows the division of the equation into 4 different groups to be reproduced in Grasshopper with different sets of algorithms. This tool provides already the possibilities of indicating a diversity of materials that covers the ground and all the tree species found in the mapping of interception performance. After testing the tool, we found that in comparison to the context A, where there was no tree and a considerable distribution of permeable areas, the trees, while covering just 18% of the ground, have reduced the runoff in 11%, as illustrated in context B. In association with permeable areas, in context C, the runoff dropped in 38%. When comparing the performance attained with the tool to the conventional method of the pixel map, it is possible to highlight some aspects. The pixel map is a method in which a grid is drawn over an aerial picture in order to calculate the distribution of materials that cover the ground through the identification of the most prominent one in each cell. It means that this method is based on approximations that, in the end, could lead to inaccuracies in the final result. As shown in Table 6, the area of materials changed according to the size of the cell in comparison to the real area of materials identified with the tool. It demonstrates the precision of the tool once it collects the data directly from the model available on rhinoceros, avoiding approximations. After this research, the conclusions possible to draw are that the tool has shown a high effectiveness in collecting data from models designed in rhinoceros, and it is accurate while calculating the runoff formation according to the equation proposed in this study. Also, this method certifies that urban forestry is indeed a promising strategy for improving the quality and the resiliency of urban areas in face of the climate change. The tool provides a faster option to assess how our designs could impact on the environment, but there are limitations concerning to the specificities of how each species intercepts rainwater, which can be solved by estimating these values based on the structure of the tree, so expanding the possibilities of applying different species in our studies. This is the list of references used in this presentation. We'd like to say thank you to the Research and Innovation Support Foundation of the State of Espírito Santo in Brazil for supporting this research through the PROCAP ME 2020 scholarship, and also to you that have been here watching this presentation. We leave our email addresses for further contacts, and that's it. Bye-bye.
Hello, my name is Débora. I'm a PhD student in Architecture and Urbanism at Federal University of Viçosa in Brazil. I will present the work Leaf Courage Quantification for the Design of Vegetative Shading Geometry using Algorithmic Modeling coupled with Image Software, supervised by Professor Martinez and Zuin. The green facet is characterized by the use of climbing species that grow close or far and are guided by wire trussels, and its main objective is act a solar control element in architecture. This facet get many benefits for the construction and the environment. However, there are some gaps related to computer simulation methods to explore the behavior on the system. The researchers have considered vegetation as a static element missing to observe the dynamics and development of the plant. To stimulate the development on the species, it's necessary to observe its vegetation cover. Therefore, we can use algorithmic parametric modeling software. We need to create a surface that represents the percentage of leaf cover in species. Determining these parameters are essential to predict the long term of the vegetation and to model the conditions of plant adaptation in the environment. This work aims to collect parameters related to leaf cover of climb species suitable for the tropical climate by digital mapping to serve as an input to algorithmic parametric model in grasshopper. This research uses two methods: a methods for the acquisition and digital process of image and algorithmic parametric modeling. Before starting the code, we followed some species to see their evolution along the year by 12 months and all seasons in the year. We collect the images and after we convert in binary images for quantify their monthly percentage. We gather the data to feed your code because there are not records of these parameters in literature. We started the modeling by defining a surface according the dimensions of prototype, and later we subdivided the surface to refer to image pixels. We import the binary images in the code according the 12 months and adjust the black levels to correspond to the foliage plant. Finally, we use the black channel of foliage to calculate the percentage coverage. The complete code contains 5 steps: surface creation and subdivision, image mapping, adjust, and percentage validation. This image shows how close we got to the result found with the two software, and we can consider that grasshopper can quantify values very closely found with image J. The research has got the following results. The experimental method helped to collect data on the leaf cover of climbing species to feed the code. With the code validation, we are able to calculate the leaf percentage coverage for flat surface. The code makes it possible to analyze by plant leaf coverage over a year and by all season. For the financiation support, we thank to NOLAB, the graduate program in Architecture and Urbanism at Federal University of Viçosa, and the Foundation for Research Support of the State of Minas Gerais, FAPEMIG. For the financial experimental support, we thank to Plant Science Department, and we thank all the volunteers who help to production of this research.
This paper concerned the intersection of strategies for circularity of construction materials with design for manufacture, assembly and disassembly through the development of a shape grammar and implementation through parametric models. The material qualities of ceramic roof tiles have provided new formal interpretations that induced a new functional use of all. By disassembling ceramic roof tiles from roofs and assembling them into walls, its circularity potential was enlarged. To proceed to future cycles and increase resource efficiency and reduce waste generation, disassembly requirements have to be included in design stages through design for disassembly. If design for disassembly principles are combined with principles for design for manufacture and assembly, that reinforces the idea that designing and optimizing a product together with its production systems can reduce the development time and cost and increase performance, quality and profitability needed for circular economy, can be achieved more easily. Walls composed of ceramic roof tiles can be already found in the built environment. Walls of stacked tiles as shading elements in facades are some examples. Ceramic roof tiles, walls, installations where computational design tools have been used to challenge new design and assembly possibilities have also been tested. The corpus of solutions that these examples constitute show that the reuse of ceramic roof tiles in buildings can produce architectural design solutions that both comply with environmental goals and comprise a rich set of patterns of composition that has not yet been fully explored. In the context of this work are relevant previous shape grammars that aim to describe the generation of patterns. These studies show the potential of inferring shape grammars from the analysis of a corpus of pre-existing pattern design languages, allowing the derivation of the initial corpus, new designs in the language, and justifying its use as computational research methodology. A new shape grammar for all design systems with ceramic roof tiles is presented. Firstly, the analysis of a set of 3 existing solutions of ceramic roof tile walls was performed. Case studies A, B, and C selected based on 2 criteria: functioning as a wall and diversity of composition between case studies. We proceeded to the compilation and information grouping into parametric schemas of the formal principles of the case studies in the analysis followed by the inference of shape grammar rules through analytic process. The identification of connection types used was also performed. The analytic grammar produced has then been subject to an assessment of compliance of the rules with the reversibility of connection types used as the main indicator of disassembly. The new shape grammar extended the ones previously produced by incorporating reversible connections detailing into new and transformed rules and by setting new combinatorial patterns. Finally, a translation of the grammar principles into a parametric computational model that comply with design for manufacture, assembly, and disassembly main requirements allowed to automate the generation of design solutions and to extend the design process to the assembly and disassembly stages using robotic fabrication techniques. The analytic grammar resulted in 7 sets of rules. The A sets of rules correspond to the traditional wall, a regular, simple aggregation with bearing capacity represented in Rule A1. The mortar ensures the vertical stability of the elements. In B sets of rules, traditional brick construction where the brick is laid also with mortar inspire the formal compositions used. In C sets of rules, several compositional rules for the building's facade consisting of different levels of permeability of the facade have been identified. C2 uses mortar as connection solution between roof tiles. C3 is achieved by using the tile laid along its length directly without any accessory to establish the connections between roof tiles. C4 is a variation used for interior walls but has structural dependence from third elements, also with direct connection between tiles. For the assessment of compliance with design for manufacture, assembly, and disassembly, the indicator reversibility of connection was used. The reversibility of a connection is defined by the existence of damage in both the elements connected and the accessory establishing the connection after disassembly. The rules that use mortar as joining do not comply with the reversibility requirement, as the disassembly process will result in some damage of the ceramic roof tiles and destruction of the connection material, and therefore the solution for the connection had to be changed. Only rules C3 and C4 would not constitute barriers to the recovery of ceramic roof tiles for future use, as they constitute a direct connection without any accessory. For the shape grammar that integrates reversibility principles, the mortar was replaced by battens in rules previously identified, giving place to new correspondent rules. Unlike mortar, battens constitute reversible connections and reuse of all components becomes possible. Several design solutions can be derived from the final shape grammar by the combination of different rules. As an example, the set of R6 rules has been combined with the set of R8 rules, which are transformed from the set of C2 rules extracted from the case study B, the beehive. Other design solutions were derived from the final shape grammar, demonstrating the combination of different rules with parametric variations. A computational model was implemented in Grasshopper visual programming language that interacts with modeling software Rhinoceros, with the aim of creating a pseudo-interpreter of the shape grammar rules to automate the generation of design solutions and extending the design process achievements to the assembly and disassembly stages by robotic fabrication techniques. Modularization strategies in scripting were used to provide a more clear and readable structure to keep the model manageable, and to ensure that each of these groups would correspond as much as possible to a grammar set rule. For this reason, each set of rules were implemented in modules in accordance with the surveyed case studies, emulating the shape rules for the formal arrangement of the roof tiles, considering the connections and sequence of assembly. A second part of the model automates the gathering sequence of application of the roof tiles, simulating an assembly process that starts in the lower layers toward the upper sections of the wall. This module intentionally tries to implement the behavior and conditions of the assembly on site. A final set of modules incorporates the translation of the assembly process to robot programming language through KUKA PRC. The paper explored new methods for the reuse of ceramic roof tiles, meeting the goals of circular economy in the building industry, namely the inference of a shape grammar from existing examples of design walls of ceramic roof tiles and its subsequent transformation to comply with design for manufacture, assembly, and disassembly connection guidelines. More rules can be developed in order to enrich the grammar, pattern composition outputs. Also, guidelines for design for manufacture, assembly, and disassembly are broader than the reversible connections. Therefore, future works to be developed should include compliance with other requirements. Further, the implementation of the shape grammar into parametric design, integrating robotic assembly processes, was illustrated in order to test its application to non-regular design solutions. A deeper analysis on the assembly and disassembly stages through the use of robotic fabrication techniques should be addressed in future work. Thank you for your attention.
Which kind of imagination do we need to rethink our world with the advent of climate change? The latest IPCC and UNEP reports show that we're quickly arriving at points of no return in the warming of our planet. When we architects look at ways to mitigate climate change, we tend to just offer slight improvements to the same ways we built and created this climate emergency. We are in a crisis of imagination. In this paper, we argue that we need to change our imaginations. We dive into an architecture that searches for its future in the field of synthetic biology. Biology and nature were different in 1859. In 1859, Charles Darwin published The Origins of Species, which immortalized the concept of natural selection. That same year, in 1859, most of the South Florida region was an untouched subtropical wetland. Just 2 decades later, in 1881, the Florida Land and Improvement Company from Hamilton Diston purchased 4 million acres, the largest real estate purchase in history. Diston and later Governor Brower began a massive draining of the wetlands and Lake Okeechobee and imposed the 1 by 1 mile grid over the territory of South Florida. All this massive transformation was done with very simple and fragile late 19th century and early 20th century technology. The story of South Florida is the story of the world. The world that Charles Darwin saw completely disappeared in just 130 years. Today, 50% of the lands and living ecosystems are determined by our current society. As the planet changed, so did the field of biology. By the beginning of the 1900s, biological studies began to move away from the natural environments and into labs that began to study the principles of life, which obtained a major breakthrough with the discovery of the DNA in the 1950s. Today, the field of synthetic biology is allowing us to do DNA reading and DNA writing. This is the fastest growing technology in human history. It is growing at a rate of 10 times per year, compared to computer technology that is rising only by a factor of 1.5 times per year. Synthetic biology involves emerging techniques that allow us to design, edit, and engineer all kinds of living organisms. Today we can manufacture molecule by molecule fuels, new plants and crops, lab-grown meat, bio-grown leather, milk, lab-grown wood, plants that do not need fertilizer, fragrances, fabrics, novel pharmaceuticals, age-reversal techniques. This project attempts to reimagine Miami. The proposal envisions a series of islands that grow by themselves in the Biscayne Bay using synthetic biology. One project looked at the biological circuitry which allows cyanobacteria to capture carbon dioxide in the water via photosynthesis and transform it into finely layered rock material. The process is similar to the living stromatolites that were abundant in the Cambrian age. If you can keep cyanobacteria colonies alive for a significant period, they can grow at an exponential rate. George Church, a synthetic biologist from Harvard, estimated that we could grow one of these islands every 2 days with re-engineered cyanobacteria. This project looks at water towers. Sea level rise brings a paradox. The more the sea level rise, the less availability of drinkable water. So this project works with processes of creating a living organism that works with desalinization, absorption, and retention of water. The project follows the process of growth via aggregation, through a reverse Semper-Nott strategy for weight distribution. With the rise of format fermentation, we could become a civilization with abundant level of energy. This would allow us to do things like reverse osmosis, and will potentially allow us to fully control our sources of water. Another project is a self-folding synthetic plant based on the design structure of a stellate mesh. In each one of these projects, we try to challenge our imagination and move more deeply into questioning what is bioaesthetics. The understanding of the process of growth is critical in developing the imagination in the studios. This plant is imagined as a vertical tree that could produce all kinds of biologically programmed crops. The goal of this transgenic biome scheme is to allow its inhabitants to connect with a fragile synthetic nature. The project works with the embryonic development of membrane structures and particle aggregation. Each project we work on is developed based on a particular desirable condition. We study particular processes of growth and investigate what makes an organism develop their shape. In this project, we work with the growth of a bioengineered plant. In this other project, we work on how to produce an infrastructure from a single surface. This project works with the growth of a programmable biological matter with artificial cell systems that communicate with each other using catenated structures. This project is particularly grounded on a research work developed at the Technical University in Munich. This other project is a living structure inspired by the process of secretion of calcium carbonate in corals. In this other project, we work with branching organisms that support the habitats of specific species that migrate through South Florida. Make us think how synthetic design could begin to transform not only cities, but our biosphere. As a conclusion, one of the main drivers of our studio was to observe how biological agents could activate spatial evolution, and how our sensible bodies could be augmented in a synthetic biological age. Fiction can be a taboo in architecture. The method of making in synthetic biology inhabits in a different epistemic space than traditional scientific discovery. By celebrating making, synthetic biology has a deeper relationship with seeing, with envisioning. In these studios, at first, we tried to find existing techniques in synthetic biology. We studied processes that could produce quick methods of biomineralization via different bacteria processes, synthetic protein, collagen, synthetic spider silk, and others. However, after conversations with several synthetic biology researchers, we were convinced that the next plateau of SynBio was envisioning fiction, not just technology. a space in which the next generation of synthetic biology can reinvent itself. These are a couple of images of our studio. We can be reached at biocity.tumblr.com. All the names of the participants can be found there.
Okay, thank you very much. Very interesting presentation, and also a different approach that in a rich session. So I will start to ask each one of you to synthesize the relation of the project or with nature, or in his research, how is this? I see, for example, Jenso, that I will call first. We are looking at this in a more theoretical side, right?
Correct.
But
We are looking at more theoretical side, but at the same time, we are looking at some examples which are really implemented in the field of practice. So they are inspiring the real architects and the real engineers, and they become a source of inspiration for them to be implemented. And as we may relate it with the last projects presented by in the studio experiences, they have started with the synthetic biology, but they have the natural organisms. Although we have not seen they are resulted in the real buildings, but might be an option for them to go maybe in the larger biosphere. So I can relate them maybe like this.
okay, but you also talk about the classifications that you came to, and what do you think will be the next step for your research, or could be your next step? What do you think it will be interesting to follow?
It will be interesting to look at more cases. We have known these cases for like more than 10 years, and we have the more contemporary ones, the new current ones. And if we have a chance to trace them back and make new relations, we may see that those classifications might be diverse, or they may overlap at some more points, or whether there are new connections, we may figure out what they are, I believe.
Okay, thank you. Iago?
Yes.
So you have a different relation with nature in your project, right?
Yes. What I could learn in the course of my research is that the city inevitably changes the dynamics that we observe in the natural environment, right? So when I propose this tool, I intend to allow the assessment of how our designs impact on the nature, especially on the hydrological dynamics. So we could measure how much of this impact could happen in the city, and how could it be lessened.
So and it was also interesting to see that you have something in common, maybe with Deborah,
Yes.
about the species, and also maybe with Alfredo, because I don't know if you thought about simulating growth, because if we see both presentations, maybe we can imagine that in some situations we can have the growth of trees or leaf coverage.
Yes.
That could represent in general, and will not force us to have one document every species, and so that will be nice.
This article was written around June, July, and by the time that was the first version of the tool, and I was trying to work with the species itself, trying to understand how each one intercepted rainwater, but then I saw that it was pretty limiting, so I started to work on identifying patterns between the interception capacity and the architecture of the tree, how it's structured, the canopy, the leaf size, the texture of the bark, and I managed to identify some patterns, some relations in them. And I created 4 groups according to the characteristics of the tree, and it's based on assumptions, but we could get nice results from it.
Yeah, by the way, there is a very important reference that is on growth of trees and plants by the author of the L system. I don't know how to spell his name in Polish. I guess Alfredo knows this. I guess Zuzuniek or something like that. He with Lindmeyer, they wrote this on beauty of plants, and it's maybe it could be used. Deborah, your work was very interesting. What do you think nature can help improve in designing?
I'm going to translate to her because she doesn't speak English, but I can answer for her as well. Débora, ele te perguntou como você acha que a integração da natureza, desse organismo vivo, né, aos projetos, o que você vê no seu trabalho em relação a isso?
Isso, na verdade, como é que poderia ajudar esse estudo da natureza a desenhar, por exemplo, melhores projetos?
Bom, no meu ponto de vista, eu acredito que por eu estar trabalhando com as espécies já durante um tempo, eu escolhi trabalhar durante um ano por conta do nosso período, né, o prazo do doutorado. Mas esse acompanhamento me fez ter uma ideia maior de como que é o comportamento fisiológico dessas espécies que eu escolhi trabalhar. Então, assim, eu acredito que se encaixa nessa temática que a gente está discutindo, porque eu não escolhi só representá-la fisicamente, mas eu tenho um conhecimento, uma abordagem de como que ela vai se comportar conforme cresce, qual é o direcionamento que provavelmente ela vai ter no crescimento, as necessidades que ela precisa ter para se manter naquela forma considerada ótima para uma fachada. Então, esses cuidados, essa percepção da planta em si, da fisiologia, como que ela se comporta, eu acho que está ligado, né, essa questão da natureza, porque eu não estou só preocupada em resolver uma questão estética de fachada e proporcionar algum benefício para a edificação. Eu também, na minha pesquisa, a gente tem uma preocupação de como manter essas espécies bem ao longo da vida útil dela. Então, tem que ter essa visão também, mais além do que só o projeto.
Just synthesizing, she talked about the how to predict the behavior, because today there is a lack of data, especially about climbing species related to tropical weather. Then her goal is first extract these parameters, using field equipment, and then try to translate it to an algorithm. And in terms thinking about whole year, because the growth is not linear. Sometimes the species lose leaves, for example. Then she's trying to understand the behavior, the growth, and also how to keep and maintain the system.
Ok. Débora, mas aí você acha que essas folhas podem dar melhores edifícios, melhor vida para as pessoas? Ou acha que elas vão ser só um aspecto estético? Na verdade, isso que eu estava tentando perguntar. Qual seria o...
Perdão. Então, isso é um estudo que já está bastante avançado, essa parte seria mais voltada à psicologia ambiental, né? O que ela proporciona para quem vai ter o contato com essas espécies. Cientificamente falando, já é comprovado que sim, elas trazem muitos benefícios em questão de melhoria da qualidade do ar. Então, você tem no momento que você está em contato com essas fachadas, aquele ambiente vai estar melhor refrigerado, melhor a umidade vai estar melhor, você tem essa questão do sombreamento, então ela também protege contra o sol em algumas situações que pode ter insolação em algumas fachadas, e também tem a parte negativa que pode atrair alguns insetos, por exemplo. Então, dependendo da situação, a espécie que você utilizar vai atrair alguns insetos que talvez não seja tão agradável. Então, é uma controvérsia, é bom, mas nem todo mundo vai gostar, né? Nem todo mundo vai ficar satisfeito.
Yeah, among the benefits, there are some thermal solutions, of course, some ambiental solutions, but also related to aesthetics and compositions, and sometimes another behaviors that are not good, depends on the species you have, smells and things like this.
Thank you. Claudia, you're also concerned with nature, but in a different way to make your projects with this roof tile. Tell us a little about it.
Our approach is try to somehow to protect nature from what we do. So how we build, and the relation with nature is obviously an environmental point of view, and we try to protect, to find solutions that use less resources from nature, a problem that is quite obvious now, and at the same time reduce the amount of waste produced from existing buildings that have to be transformed. So we cross that by exploring other ways of using elements that lost their use in the building, and instead of being demolished and becoming waste to be used. So it's mainly an environmental point of view, an environmental perspective regarding the relation with nature.
Okay, so I was very curious with something that you were explaining during your presentation that is connected with the mortar use or not, because we see these structures, they are beautiful structures assembled, but most of them they use this cement or binder mortar, no? And so we think if we want to disassemble them, maybe it's not possible, but you found some situations in which you could avoid mortar, but what we understood. Tell us a little.
Yeah. Okay, so within strategies and design principles for reuse of building elements, we can look, if we look at existing buildings, they present a problem to us because in some countries, it's not the same in all countries, but some countries like Portugal, for example, mortar is very present in construction. So when changes need to be made to a building, usually demolition is the main strategy, because materials could be recycled but not reused. And sometimes some solutions that exist, for example, a roof tile, it's not traditionally used with mortars. It's fixed. Fixings are used, but when they are reused, some of the examples we found are with mortar. So we propose alternative ways regarding design for disassembly principles.
Yeah, because maybe also the connection could be something you look at. You have already a set of rules, interesting applications. So maybe if you think about the different connection, like Romans didn't use mortar, but
yes,
we could
that's
have
why
maybe a 3D connection, something like that. I don't know.
We are just in the beginning, so
okay, but it's very interesting. I'm not making
no.
on your project. I'm just talking about something like
we agree with that approach. Sorry, we agree with that approach. I think.
Okay. And we were also very the Alfredo presentation was very interesting and different at the same time, and Alfredo, in a way, he proposes to redesign nature or to grow new constructions with synthetic biology. Is it like that, Alfredo?
Yeah, like we already redesigned nature. Like during the Industrial Revolution, we completely transformed. Like we're all mammals in this room, and also people looking. But we on weight, humans were 36% of the mammals on Earth, and 60% of the other mammals that are on Earth are mammals that we eat: cows, pigs, sheep. Only 4% of the mammals that are on Earth are wild. So we have completely transformed already the world. And so nature really is a concept that has been evolving. Like well, that's why I showed Charles Darwin in 1856 when he published The Origins of Species. The world that he saw when he traveled through the Beagle around the world was an untouched world. But at that time, we were less than 1 billion people. And now we're putting 1 billion people on Earth every 13 years, every 14 years. And so nature biology move away from the travelage into nature and went into like the microscope and the DNA. And synthetic biology really only was born in 2006 with the BioBrick Foundation. And in a very short period, today you began to see Impossible Burgers, the Nut Milk Company, plant-based milk, plant-based bacon, plant-based eggs. They're just beginning to appear like very quickly. Like 3 years ago, it was kind of like a big dream, and now they're in the supermarket. And so, but always when a new technology happens, it comes with the design of before. Like the burger, the protein transformed into food, it comes with the technology of the burger. Same thing with the cars. When the cars appear, they look like carriages. So there is a problem really of design imagination, to really design. So I go to one conference that is called SynBioBeta. That's the most important conference of synthetic biology in the US. And I noticed there that the people that are the upfront developing this idea, they understand too that right now synthetic biology is basically fermentation and it's industrial biology. But they want to go into something else, into the next step. And there I think that we architects have a play to role, the artists, in the imagination part, into really beginning to imagine that this is possible, that it's possible to move. So that leap, like I began to really get into this in 2015. And in 2018, I began to do the studios because I began to understand that really the imagination was the problem. Like today, like for example, the COP, the climate change conference that are done, there is all this kind of like hope that governments will solve this problem, but they will not. They will not. They cannot do it. It's only the imagination that will be able to do it. Like, and if, like for example, architects, when we think about sustainable buildings, it's just tweaking a little bit a concrete building to make it zero energy. But that's not going to solve the problem. Like the IPCC already said, is not carbon reduction the problem, is how you capture CO2. Now, the next step. Like we are already at points of no return. The Antarctic, the Arctics, the temperature are growing 3 to 5 degrees by 2050. There is nothing we can do. Doesn't matter if all our cars are electric, all our buildings are zero energy. When that happens, the melting of the permafrost is going to release 1 trillion tons of carbon. It's beginning to release right now, carbon and methane. And it's like 2.5 times of burning all the trees in the world. So when we began to think like that way, we began to see that our little way of architectural thinking or moving things here and here, it doesn't really work. It's not gonna do anything. We still are gonna be adding 1 billion more people in the next decade. They're gonna want to be more industrialized. Their standard of living gonna move. So the real problem of really understanding nature, really, I think, is to begin to understand that really biology is the most incredible machine in the universe. It's able to move. It's the cereal that we eat in the morning was alive. And it came from the air. It was a plant that moved electrons, the Calvin cycle that created the cereal or the bread. It's all created from this machinery that is not. So I think it's a breakthrough. Like SIGraDi, I was at the beginning of SIGraDi. I met Arturo Montagu and during those times.
I read your statement for the book.
Yeah, and so it was very, very interesting to see the hope that we had in computing, but computing is still it's mechanical. The robots are mechanical. Like the biology is much more powerful than anything mechanical. Like I think now at this stage I began to think that computing is like the end of the Archimedes imagination. It's the finishing. And biology is really a completely different thing. Like, and we are all biology beings. All what we eat, except for salt and water, has been alive. Most of the clothes that we wear were at one point alive. So it's about the re-engineering of that thing. So this is the beginning, I think, of something completely different.
Thank you very much. I totally agree. Like nature is a construction. Also, there is a cultural side in nature. Like, and also, as you explained well, could be changed through synthetic biology. What I would also like to ask is, how do you imagine the structure that you propose interacting with the environment or with the human species? Because they are so very beautiful, that's already a good interaction. But do you in this prophetic vision, do you see more to strengthen this link with the users, or
that's the part that becomes more difficult to imagine, like actually the users. Like for me, like one of the things I began to see, like for example, is the more primitive cultures. Like for example, and we have kind of a treasure in the world, is Japan. Japan was not colonized until 1860, and people in Japan live with rice paper. They live with rice paper, and it's not because they were stupid. They couldn't build gigantic walls to protect from the cold. It's because they wanted to live culturally. They wanted to live with the biosphere next to them, and the older environmental system was in the kimonos. So they put, if it was cold, they put 2 more, 3 more kimonos on top of it. And so I think too, as we can re-engineer our habitats, we can begin to re-engineer our bodies. For example, like for me, like the skin, like the biggest organ that we have, is the most potentially powerful design tool to re-engineer the environment. So we might not need big amounts of energy or enclosed buildings. There is a synthetic biologist, Drew Endy, that, for example, he said that the problem imagination is that right now we live in a society of energy scarcity, but he proposes that fermentation will double the amount of energy on the world. So the problem is, instead of thinking like how to replace scarcity energy, how can we imagine a society that has abundant, free energy? For example, like we can change the aquifers on the water, how they move around. We can move maybe potable water to the Himalayas, to the top of the Himalayas, and we could live in the Himalayas. So in the end, I think the project is one of the students I didn't present here. One of the project was about in the Arctic, like what is happening with the Arctic, the polar bears. The source of food disappeared, the seals disappear, and they're cannibalizing one each other. So the male eats the cubs, the little babies, and this is happening more and more and more. And as the ice caps began to melt, this is more depth is moving into more in depth. So so with some of the students, they imagine like some explorer things that actually could feed the polar bears, and the polar bears could smell. The polar bear smells at around at a mile away, where the seals are the source of food. So in the end, I think what I began to see with this thing is, in the end, is how do we move back into how we were, like 10, 15, 20, 30,000 years in nature, inside. in a nature that in the end is kind of like control. And so the issue of the wild, what happened to the wild, like the fox, the idea of the fox, the fox became kind of a scary figure in literature like 200, 300 years ago. It was not like that before. Like the Mayas, the Incas, how they live with the animals was a different connection to the world. So I think that there is that kind of, in the end, it's going to be that kind of relationship. How do we deal with the polar bear? How do we connect with the polar bear? So like the architecture itself is not only like a shelter anymore, but it is kind of really moving into the biosphere. It's kind of like, and at the end, also the whole project, for example, of colonization of other planets is a biological problem. You cannot take all the loads of buildings or food to another planet. It's how do you re-engineer the biology so you can build the food sources, the structure, everything in other planets.
Thank you, inspiring. André, so I think we still have time for some more questions.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, I just want to ask Kenzo, just to. Sorry if I didn't spell your name exactly right. Just to know, among the categories and the works you searched, in terms of representative or numbers, which one or which category has more works? Thinking about
the physical ones have work, because as we can see from the examples, even in the design studios that we are experimenting with students, we are first going to how they are looking at like, and then we are trying to extract some geometrical rules and appearances of those biological entities. And I believe that's why we have those category as the most populated one. But if we have a chance to explore more, and if we have a chance to explore that in the studio environment more, these categories, maybe we can find and figure out some new pedagogical approaches to invest more energy on the other categories too. And rather than having a superficial connection, we may go for more deeper connections into the nature.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Gonçalo, I think we are almost in the end.
I guess we still have 5 minutes, right?
5 minutes, yes. Well, for Alfredo, I want to know, first it's inspiring, and I want to know from you, what do you think or what do you expect in terms of education in architecture? Maybe topics or skills envision this future?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Like one of the, I think again, it's an issue of imagination. Like for example, there is a professor in my school that she began to question about history. And she wanted, there are 3 histories, and she wants to change one history to the history of like big history, the biosphere. And again, I think we, in architecture, we're too narrow. Our history, the Romans, the medieval times, etc., is very narrow. When you begin to see the understanding of the history, for example, you understand that really 100% of the air that we breathe is biological product from cyanobacteria. It happened 2.5 billion years ago. And cyanobacteria, when it dies, you can transform it into cement, like corals use cyanobacteria to create their form. And so I think is about how to expand this. And it's very interesting because the synthetic biologists themselves, they're not biologists. They come from all over the place. They come from computer science, electrical engineering. They're hackers and they're makers, a maker movement, and they're just making. And it's kind of like an. So I think it's like almost anything. You just need to. It's like a pool, and you need to dive in. And I think history, I think, is very interesting. Like to begin to think big history, I think create more big thinking than narrow history, narrow thinking.
Thank you. Yeah, we have a long way to this. Yeah, but it's nice that we are starting to think about it right now, especially related to what Kenzo told us about the physical approach, but maybe we need to explore other approaches and categories of works with how to work with nature. Not only in terms of design, but also re-engineering the design, as you told us. Great.
What is interesting about this technology is the speed of 10 times per year, of growth at 10 times per year. Like the thing, when I was a student, I studied in Berkeley in the early 1990s when computer was starting, and everything was there. Berkeley had another one called Ink2Me, and I knew the people that were doing Ink2Me, and it became for like 2 years the kind of the search engine of the world. And then Google came. It was a Stanford project, and it was a master thesis. So you could see like everything happening there. So I think again, since this is faster, it always beats expectation. Now it's not so much like in really moving into construction right now. There are very few projects working on this. Most of them are really biobricks, biomason that's doing bricks, Lingrove that does lab-grown wood. There are few things, but I hope in the next 10 years there will be more projects coming.
Great, thank you.
Well, I don't know if we have more questions, but I will also would like to thank everyone. And I was just remembering Alfredo. He was one of the pioneers in SIGraDi, I guess, some years ago. But he made a statement, and we'll have a book that will be released tomorrow. That is on the 25th year of SIGraDi. So we will invite you all to download it tomorrow. And well, and to enjoy the rest of our presentations, we are on the last day, but still, I guess one last session for you guys, and then we'll have the general meeting. That's where we will release the book. I'm also one of the organizers of the book, and we'll have a social event. Not as we would like to, but please come, and since we cannot continue our chat like we used to do on the real world and take a coffee and talk a little more with you guys. Well, but thank you very much, and hope to see you soon, and good luck for your presentations. Thank you also, Andressa, for the help, and that's it. Let's take a photo. Could everyone turn on their camera, please? Bruno? Tá bonito você.
Hi, Gonçalo. Congratulations for the SIGraDi conference organization.
Manfred, are you there?
Hi, Bruno.
Just 1 second. Let me just. Let's do it again. Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
You